I never thought love could smell like dead flowers. The hall was lit like a dream. Golden chandeliers, laughter, clinking glasses. The bride smiled with the radiance of someone who believes she's conquered life. And I, standing among strangers, felt my heart pounding as if it wanted to escape my chest. She was my ex. And there I was, guest of honor, pretending it didn't hurt. The air smacked of irony. Every song that played seemed to mock my memory. People glanced at me sideways, some with pity, others with curiosity. Did he really come? They seemed to ask without moving their lips. I wondered the same thing. Why had I agreed to come? Maybe out of pride, maybe out of love, or maybe because there was still something she needed to hear from me. As she passed by, the scent I knew so well pierced me like a blade. For a second, time stood still. I remembered everything. The promises, the late nights, the lies. Her dress was white, but I knew how many shadows were sewn into that fabric. There was something strange in the air. A nervousness that wasn't just coming from me. The groom avoided my gaze, and his friends whispered to each other, barely concealing it. I could feel it. Something was about to happen. And if I told you I wasn't there to ruin anything, would you believe me? As the ceremony began, a nagging memory gnawed at me. A message, a voice, a secret that was never revealed. It wouldn't leave me alone. I looked at it and saw an unfinished story, an open wound, a stage about to collapse. The celebrant's words mingled with the clink of glasses, the forced laughter, the distant sound of a piano. And I, standing there, motionless, realized that life sometimes sets the perfect stage for the final agreement. With each step she took toward the altar, I felt my silence cost me dearly, because there are times when silence is the same as accepting death inside. And I wasn't born to die in silence. But what would you do if you discovered the truth right in the middle of the party? The microphone sat there on the DJ table, shining like an invitation. And in that instant I knew. This wasn't just a wedding. It was my trial. The silence inside that hall was deceptive. From the outside, everything seemed like a celebration. Soft music, smiling guests, glasses of sparkling wine raised in toasts that echoed like empty promises. But inside, there was a constant buzz, an unease that grew with each passing second. I observed every gesture, every touch, every glance exchanged between her and the man they now called husband. And the more I saw, the more I understood that some stories don't end, they just change stages. With each laugh of hers, something inside me tightened. It wasn't jealousy, it was something else. It was the discomfort of realizing you've been deceived in silence, with rehearsed kindnesses and sweet words that hid secrets. People think betrayal hurts in the moment, but it doesn't. The real pain comes when you witness it celebrated, as if nothing had happened. The scent of flowers mingled with the wine, and the air seemed too heavy to breathe. The lights reflected in her eyes, and for an instant, I saw the same expression I'd seen the day she left. Lightness. A lightness I'd never felt since. It was then that I realized, it wasn't just about lost love. It was about dignity, about everything I'd let slip away, believing time would heal. A waiter passed by offering me champagne. I declined. The sound of the music seemed distant, as if it were coming from another world. I was present but not part of it. And it was precisely in this feeling of displacement that I began to see things clearly. Sometimes God places us in the midst of chaos so that we can see the truth without filters. I remembered the nights she'd said she was tired, the ignored messages, the perfect apologies. I also remembered how I believed in everything because love, for me, was synonymous with patience. But there's a fine line between patience and blindness, and I'd crossed it without realizing it. As the celebrant spoke of eternal love, I realized how short eternity can be when lies are involved. And it was there, between one vow and the next, that something inside me began to shift. The pain began to give way to calm. Strange, almost dangerous calm. The kind that precedes a decision you never thought you'd make. Her words echoed through the microphone. Sweet, measured, perfectly rehearsed. But every syllable sounded like a confession to me. I saw my fiancé smiling, but his gaze kept drifting away, as if carrying an invisible weight. And suddenly, I remembered a voice that wouldn't leave my head, the message I'd received days before by mistake. A recording she never intended for me to hear. It was this memory that brought me there. Not to seek revenge, but to face her. To look her in the eye and return what she tried to take from me: peace. And yet, as the microphone sat there, silent, I wondered if it was worth it. If exposing the truth to everyone was justice or just another open wound. The hall seemed smaller, the air warmer. The priest's words dissolved into noise. And I, motionless, realized that sometimes you have to lose everything to reclaim your own name. Perhaps that's why so many people choose to stay here, following each revelation, because they know that courage is born from what can no longer be hidden. I took a deep breath, and my eyes met hers. The smile faded for a second. It was brief but enough. That was the first sign she knew. She knew I wasn't just there as a guest. She knew the silence was about to end. She knew. And in that brief moment when our eyes met, all the noise in the room disappeared. It was as if someone had muted the world, leaving only the echo of what was to come. The microphone, still there on the table, seemed to be calling me. The light spun slowly, and I felt a cold sweat trickling down the back of my neck. I couldn't tell if it was fear, anger, or simply the weight of fate pushing me into the center of that story I'd tried to bury for so long. The memory of the message came back to me with a vengeance. The sound of her voice, trembling and whispered, saying words I should never have heard. It was the kind of revelation that changes everything, that turns love into ruin. "I can't keep lying to him," she'd say. "But if he finds out, it's all over for me." These words echoed like a curse. I couldn't tell if she was talking about her new husband or me. I only knew that, somehow, we were both trapped in the same deception. With every second, I felt the weight of the choice that awaited me. To speak or to remain silent. To hurt or to free. Justice has a price, and sometimes the price is one's own heart. The celebrant asked the guests to rise for the toast. Glasses clinked harmoniously, the crystal clear sound mingling with the murmur of voices. I saw people smiling, believing they were witnessing the beginning of a new life, when in reality they were witnessing the end of a lie. The groom, in his impeccable suit, held her hand tightly. But I noticed the way he avoided looking at her, the slight tremor in his jaw, the lost look in his eyes whenever she called him "my love." The lie lives in the details, and that night everything screamed it. Across the table, her mother watched me intently. There was something in her gaze. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. She always knew more than she was saying. She always protected her daughter, even when it meant letting me bleed in silence. I looked away, but it was too late. The entire past had already been summoned to that room. The candles flickered, casting shadows on the walls. The music changed to something slower, almost melancholic. And as couples approached to dance, I felt increasingly isolated. There was a chasm between me and everyone there. A chasm she had dug herself, smiling. The memory of that message came back in flashes. The sound of the car in the background. The muffled laughter. A male voice saying her name. I paused, repeated, rewound, until there was no doubt. It was the same man who was now kissing her in front of everyone. The same man who had promised to take good care of her. The irony of fate is as sharp as a blade. And that recording was the blade I carried in my chest. For a moment I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. I tried to convince myself it was best to leave it all there, hidden away. But lies have a life of their own. They begged to be exposed. And the microphone, just a few feet away, seemed to pulse along with my heart. The lights shifted to the center, where the couple danced. Her dress swirled as if nothing could touch her. But I knew. He knew that beneath her perfect smile lay invisible cracks. And that all it took was one word, just one, for everything to crumble. The DJ adjusted the sound, and the rumble of the microphone filled the room for a second. People laughed, distracted, unsure of what was about to happen. I watched, motionless, feeling the tension build in the air like thunder before a storm. There are times when life seems to demand a gesture, a step forward, a choice no one else would have the courage to make. And I knew that moment was mine. I didn't yet know how or when, but something inside me had already decided. Between the distant sound of clapping and the sweet scent of flowers, I realized there was no turning back. The truth was stuck in my throat, begging to be told. And when she looked at me again, that brief, pleading, almost desperate look, I understood that before the end, there would still be a spectacle, one no one there would forget. The air seemed charged with something no one could name. Every word spoken in that room sounded like a disguise, a desperate attempt to keep up appearances. And yet, behind every smile, there was an invisible tension, as if everyone somehow sensed that this marriage wouldn't end like the others. The music continued, but my gaze remained fixed on her. There was something different about the way she held the bouquet, as if the flowers weighed more than they should. A slight tremor in her fingers, a gaze that couldn't settle on anything. With each step, she seemed more aware of my presence, more restless. It was like watching a play where the actors forget their lines but keep smiling at the audience. For a moment I considered leaving, simply turning my back and letting time resolve what pride insisted on exacting. But when I looked around, I realized how much everyone believed in that farce. Relatives, friends, neighbors, all laughing, toasting, praising the love I knew was a lie. And that somehow rekindled something inside me. It wasn't anger, it was justice. Not the blind revenge that destroys, but the kind that awakens. I remembered everything I'd swallowed silently. The meaningless excuses, the sudden disappearances, the promises that it was just work. I remembered how I'd shrunk to fit her versions, while she grew over my doubts. And there, seeing her dressed in white, I understood that my greatest weakness was never loving her. It was believing she knew what that meant too. The DJ changed tracks. A bolero began to play, slow, drawn out, almost painful. The sound of the saxophone seemed to slide through the walls and echo inside my chest. I felt goosebumps crawl, not from the romance of the music, but from the irony. That song was the same one that played when we first danced together years ago in another ballroom, when everything was still promises. I closed my eyes for a second. I saw the two of us on that long-ago night. She in the blue dress, me with trembling hands, trying to look confident. It's strange how time turns sweet memories into slow poison. When I opened my eyes, everything before me seemed like a distorted repetition, a cruel parody of something that had once been true. She spun in her husband's arms, and with each turn she glanced my way. There was no more disguise. It was fear. Fear of what I might say, of what I knew. And for a brief moment, that fear seemed more righteous than any planned revenge. Because it revealed what she truly was. Someone who had built a castle on lies and now trembled in the wind. The microphone remained there, motionless, as if waiting only for a touch. I could feel its vibration from a distance, the subtle hum that precedes speech. And then I realized that perhaps silence was the most powerful weapon I had. Sometimes it's not scandal that destroys. It's the calm gaze of someone who knows too much. People used to say that true love forgives everything. But whoever invented that never had to rise from the ashes of their own heart. Love, I've learned, is also knowing how to stop. It's knowing how to look at someone and realize that the love that remains is no longer a cure. It's a wound. As I thought this, I heard someone mention my name. Quiet whispers, glances across the room. And I realized that, even without speaking, I was already the center of that party. My every gesture carried the weight of what could happen. It was as if time had slowed down to watch. I took a deep breath. I felt the scent of the flowers, the coolness of the glass in my hand, the distant sound of fake laughter. And in that moment, I realized something curious. Power wasn't in humiliating anyone. It was in letting the truth do the work for me. It is at this point that many feel the urge to support this journey, leaving a silent signal that the message has touched them, because deep down we have all faced such a choice, to speak or just watch and let the silence speak for us. She stopped dancing for a second, trying to maintain her smile. The groom looked at her, confused. And I knew she wasn't dancing with him anymore. She was dancing with fear. She was dancing with me. And the dance, indeed, was just beginning. She continued dancing, but now every movement seemed like a cry for help. The smile on her face was just a disguise, a mask that slowly faded under the yellowish light of the spotlights. The entire room seemed to vibrate to a strange rhythm, as if the guest's joy were a thin cloth covering a truth about to explode. And I, standing still, just watched. There was something almost poetic in watching a lie crumble on its own. The DJ changed the music again. The sound became louder, more festive, as if trying to force happiness. But it was useless. The mood had changed, and everyone felt it, even if they didn't understand why. Her gaze sought mine with every break between fake laughter, and his, the fiancé's, was already beginning to show signs of discomfort. He touched his collar, looked around, looked away from me. Guilt sometimes is louder than any confession. As the dance wore on, I remembered the day she left. The sound of the door slamming still echoed inside me. She said she needed to breathe, that the problem wasn't me. And for a long time I believed it. I carried that guilt like an invisible weight. I thought my lack of lightness, my routine, my silent way of loving had been the reason. Until I discovered, much later, that she already had someone else breathing for her. That memory blew through me like a cold wind. And I realized something I'd never understood before. Betrayal doesn't begin with a kiss, it begins with silence. The moment someone decides to hide, omit, or pretend, that's when love dies, disguised as care. The guests' voices faded to noise. I could see their mouths moving, but I no longer heard the words. I was on another frequency, that of the past, blending with the present like an ancient echo. The shine of her dress reflected in the glasses, and for a second, the image seemed to multiply into 1,000 fragments of light. It was as if fate itself was showing me what was left of what I once called us. I felt a tightness in my chest, not from pain, but from something akin to relief. The feeling that, finally, the victim role was slipping from my grasp. For the first time I could see everything clearly. And this clarity, though bitter, was liberating. Her father took the stage to speak. He took the microphone, made a joke, and drew nervous laughter. But something in his voice betrayed his unease. It was as if he also knew the story was held together by fragile threads. As he spoke, her gaze never left mine. It was a silent duel. She trying to predict whether I would have the courage, and I trying to decide if silence was still a shield. The microphone passed from hand to hand. Each guest made a toast, said beautiful words, and acted out the happiness everyone expected to see. When the device reached the DJ's table again, I felt a shiver run through me. The soft metallic ringing echoed louder than it should have. Time seemed to stand still. My mind returned to the message, the sound of her voice, the muffled laughter, the phrase that had knocked me off my feet. "He'll never know." It now seemed to echo in every corner of the room, as if the walls were repeating the secret. The lights dimmed. The spotlight shifted to the center, where the couple was about to cut the cake. A simple, symbolic gesture, but that night it felt like an ironic ritual. The blade descended onto the white cake, and I almost laughed at the contrast. The purity of the frosting, the red of the filling, everything so beautiful and yet so fake. As the applause echoed, I felt my body move before I could even decide. One step, then another. The sound of shoes against the polished floor seemed louder than the music itself. Heads began to turn one by one. Smiles faded. I walked slowly, unhurriedly. Each second stretched out, as if time were waiting to see what would come next. And I was waiting too, because deep down it wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about truth. About returning to the world the same honesty that had been denied me. When I approached the DJ's table, the microphone was still vibrating, emitting a low, almost imperceptible hiss. I held out my hand. He hesitated for a moment, but then handed it over. The object was light, but what he was carrying was not. Her voice echoed for the last time in my memory. "He'll never know." And as I pressed the button, I realized that was the one promise she couldn't keep. The microphone's hiss filled the room like a warning. A small sound, but enough to silence all conversation, freeze laughter, and stop time. The couple still held the knife over the cake, their hands clasped in a symbolic gesture that, at that moment, no longer meant anything. I felt the weight of everyone's gaze on me, a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. No one understood why I was there, standing, holding the microphone that now became a boundary between what had been and what still remained to be said. Her breathing was visible, rapid, uneven. Her face, which had previously shone beneath her makeup, was beginning to lose its color. Her fiancé tried to hide it, forcing a smile, but his eyes betrayed his panic. The truth, I realized, didn't need to be shouted. It announced itself in the trembling of her hands, in the silence of her mouths, which no longer knew how to smile. The entire room felt smaller, compressed by anticipation. The lights reflected on the floor as if their brightness, too, were wavering. The air smelled of wine, flowers, and nervousness. Every sound, the clink of a glass, the creak of a chair, the muffled ring of a cell phone, seemed too echoing. Everything inside me told me this was the moment, but the decision wasn't simple. There was a fine line between justice and destruction, and I walked right on it. I looked at her. There was fear, but also something else. A silent, almost childlike plea. For a moment, I considered lowering the microphone, letting the shame do the work itself. Maybe silence would be punishment enough. But the silence had eaten away at me for too long. I'd lived trapped inside it for years, and now every word I hadn't yet said burned in my throat as if begging for release. I remembered the two of us before everything fell apart. The lazy mornings, the smell of coffee mixed with her perfume, the spontaneous laughter, the small promises of the future. It was hard to believe that the same voice that called me my love would later lie to me so calmly. The pain wasn't just in the betrayal, but in the memory of what had once been true. I gripped the microphone tightly. It felt heavier than before. The cold metal against my skin reminded me of the precision of a choice. Once made, there was no going back. People began to whisper impatiently. Her mother rose from her chair nervously. Her fiancé whispered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. She just kept her eyes fixed on me, like someone staring at their own past, returning to claim what was stolen from them. I thought of everything I could say. I could reveal the recording, the messages, the hidden meetings. I could expose every detail, every carefully constructed lie. But the words, before they could come out, transformed into something else. I didn't want revenge on her. I wanted to free myself. The voice that emerged was calm, almost serene, but firm enough to carry through the room. Each sentence echoed like a blade wrapped in velvet. I didn't need to mention names or dates. It was enough to tell what love becomes when it's used as a disguise. And little by little, people began to understand. The festive atmosphere dissolved. The air grew dense, heavy, and even without revealing everything, everyone knew that a story was being unmasked. Her eyes filled with tears, and the groom took a half step back, as if trying to get away from his own shadow. I could see fear spreading across them like a stain. But along with the fear, I felt something inside me dissolve as well. A kind of lightness, a beginning of peace. It was as if, finally, I was no longer the man who had been left behind, but simply someone whole again. Outside, the wind began to blow hard. The windows rattled, and the sound of thunder mingled with the crackle of the microphone. It was as if the outside world silently responded to what was happening inside. A balance was being restored, an old debt being paid. I stopped talking. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dense, full of meaning that no one dared to interrupt. People remained motionless, and in that moment I understood that I didn't need applause or an audience. What I sought was fulfilled, albeit incomplete. I took one last look at her. The white dress no longer seemed so pure. The party was now just an empty stage lit by memories. I took a step back, feeling the solid ground beneath my feet. And before the sound returned, before the world resumed its movement, I realized something even greater was coming. Something no words could stop. The microphone's sound ceased, and the room plunged into a silence that seemed eternal. No clinking of glasses, no whispers. Even the music, which had previously filled every corner, cut off mid-note. The party, that spectacle of appearances, collapsed without a single scream. All it took was for the truth to breathe. She still stood there, motionless, tears beginning to smudge her makeup. The groom stepped back a little, his gaze confused, trying to figure out what the audience knew and what was still hidden. Around him, the guests exchanged glances, wondering what had just happened. The air was heavy, saturated with shame and disbelief. And I, standing before them, realized something strange. I didn't feel victory. I felt only the weight of a silent liberation. The truth, when spoken, doesn't explode, it spreads. It fills the air, seeping into conversations, expressions, and small pauses. It's slow but relentless. I saw it happening before me. A woman whispered in her daughter's ear. A young man lowered his eyes, unsure whether to look at his fiancée or at me. And little by little, I realized what power truly was. It wasn't in destroying, but in letting each person reach their own conclusion, without needing to say anything else. She tried to speak, but her voice faltered. The microphone hissed again, capturing the faint sound of a defensive attempt that dissolved into thin air. It was then that I understood the value of silence. It was no longer a punishment. It was a weapon that was finally on my side. As I placed the microphone on the table and began walking toward the exit, the sound of my footsteps seemed to mark the rhythm of a new phase. Each step was a break with the past, a gesture of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. And curiously, no one tried to stop me. The path was clear, and even without looking back, I felt the weight of the gazes following me, some with guilt, others with admiration. Outside, the rain was beginning to fall. The drops hit the ground like a calm, almost purifying melody. I stood there for a moment, watching the reflection of the wet lights on the sidewalk. Everything that had once seemed like noise now became peace. And in that contrast, the chaos inside and the silence outside, I realized that perhaps true revenge lay precisely in this, emerging whole from where they tried to break me. The next few hours were a kind of haze. Messages, connections, voices trying to understand what happened. Versions began to spread, each more distorted than the last. But deep down it didn't matter. I knew that in the hearts of everyone who was there, something had changed. The couple's perfect image had been shattered, and that was irreversible. Over time I realized how that moment, that simple act of speaking, transformed into something bigger. People who previously saw me as a supporting character began to see me differently. Some came up to me discreetly to say they understood, that they'd experienced something similar. It was as if my pain had illuminated other wounds. And it's curious how certain truths, when exposed, leave scars that no one can erase. It's not the scandal that remains. It's the learning. The world may forget what was said, but never what was felt. And perhaps that's what unites us. The recognition that, at some point, everyone has faced something they needed to expose, but remained silent out of fear. When I think of that night, I still smell the wine and flowers, but now the air is light. The memory doesn't hurt, it only teaches. Because in the end, justice came not from what I revealed, but from what I managed to endure in silence. And perhaps that's why many who hear this story feel the urge to say something, to share a memory, a wound, a breakthrough. Sometimes it's in this impulse to speak, or to share what they felt, that the first step toward reckoning is born. The rain thickened, and for a moment I found myself smiling. Not a smile of triumph, but of understanding. Inside, the party continued, probably in ruins. But outside I was breathing, free, quiet but whole. There was still something to happen, I could feel it. The silence of that night wasn't the end. It was just the pause before a new beginning. The rain didn't stop. The drops fell with an almost measured cadence, as if the sky itself wanted to wash away the rest of that story. I stood there, standing under the marquee, watching the people leave the hall, one by one in silence. Their faces were the same, but something about them had changed. There was a kind of discomfort in their eyes, as if they had seen more than they wanted to see. And perhaps they had, because when the truth reveals itself, it doesn't choose what to illuminate. The ballroom door was still open. Inside, the lights still flickered, insisting on maintaining the glow of a party that had already ended. I could see her reflection, motionless near the table, her bouquet now forgotten on the floor. The groom spoke softly, gesturing, trying to control the damage, but her expression was unresponsive. It was as if she'd been ripped from a dream and still didn't know where she was. I walked slowly to my car, feeling the sound of my footsteps blend with the rain. With each step, something inside me melted away. The anger, the hurt, even the sense of injustice. Everything seemed smaller in the peace that silence provided. Still, deep down, I knew that what had begun there would not end anytime soon. Truth, once set free, takes root, and there's no telling where they will grow. In the following days, the reactions began to pour in. Some called me secretly. Others sent short messages filled with words that attempted to express solidarity, astonishment, or admiration. Some wanted details. Some sought to understand what I had actually revealed. But I learned not to explain. Explanations weaken the impact. And those who need to justify too much have already lost their reason before they even speak. Still, it wasn't easy. The line between justice and guilt is a fine one. At night, when I lay in bed, the sound of the microphone still echoed in my head. That brief hiss, the moment the entire room breathed along with me. It was strange to realize that the most tense moment of my life had also been the most liberating. As if, in facing the worst, I had found myself. There were days when I doubted my own courage. I wondered if I should have done differently, if exposing what I knew was, in fact, necessary. But when these doubts arose, I remembered the years of silence, the feeling of being invisible within my own life. And then I understood. It wasn't revenge, it was survival. Because some pains only heal when they cease to be secrets. News began to circulate quietly through the city. People love a story, especially when it involves a fall and redemption. I saw curious glances at the market, awkward greetings, interrupted whispers as I passed. It didn't bother me. I had learned that each glance says more about the observer than the observed. And deep down, I knew that time would put everything in its place. One afternoon, days after the wedding, I walked down the same street again. The flowers still hung from the front of the hall, wilted and dull, a perfect symbol of what remained. I stood there for a moment, watching the wind tear away the petals one by one. Felt like a farewell ritual. And for the first time I felt compassion, not for her, nor for what we'd experienced, but for the man I was. The one who believed in promises, the one who trusted too much, the one who expected a return from someone who only knew how to feed on applause. In the car's rearview mirror, I caught sight of my own reflection and realized there was something new in my eyes. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity, the kind that arrives when pain finally makes sense. I understood that life doesn't reward those who remain silent to maintain peace. It rewards those who speak, even trembling, when silence no longer protects. But the strange thing is that, even with this certainty, a part of me still expected something. Not an apology, not an explanation. Maybe just the sound of something closing, of a cycle ending. But life rarely offers clean endings. It prefers long pauses, the silences between one truth and another. The rain stopped. The sky was slowly lightening, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. I took a deep breath, feeling as if something new was about to begin, though I didn't know what. The wounds were still there, but they no longer hurt as much. What remained now was an open space, a fertile void ready to be filled. And as I scanned the horizon, I realized that what had begun as pain was now transforming into something deeper, a kind of new beginning disguised as an end. But I knew, true stories never end when we think they do. They just shift in tone, waiting for the next act. The following days passed as if time had lost its rhythm. Everything seemed the same, but nothing was the same. The silence of the mornings had a different weight, and even the sound of the rain hitting the window seemed to carry memories that wouldn't go away. What happened that night wasn't just an episode. It was a change of season within me. A part of me had died there, but another was beginning to breathe, slowly, timidly, but alive. The city went on with its routine, pretending not to remember, as it always does. People returned to their tables, to their cafes, to their appointments. But every now and then, they still looked at me with that mix of curiosity and restrained respect. It was as if I had done something many wish to do, but few have the courage. Put a period in the middle of a sentence that others still insist on reading. Sometimes I'd think back to that night. I'd relive the moment the room fell silent, the sound of the microphone cutting through the air, her teary eyes, the fear hidden in her fiancé's hands. It all came to me like a slow-motion scene. And yet, what struck me most wasn't the scandal. It was the moment I realized that, finally, I no longer needed answers. That some truths, when revealed, require nothing more than acceptance. However, peace didn't come immediately. It arrived in fragments, like light filtering through cracks. There were nights when I woke with a start, feeling the echo of words I never said. Other times, I dreamed of the sound of breaking glasses, feeling like I was being watched by invisible eyes. Guilt is cunning. It always tries to return when the heart begins to heal. But with each dawn, something within me strengthened. I began to rediscover the pleasure of simple things. Hot coffee, the smell of the newspaper, the sun streaming through the curtains. It was as if the world, little by little, was giving me back pieces of myself that had been lost in the silence. There was a new kind of beauty in everything, rawer, truer. Perhaps the beauty that only emerges after a fall. One day I passed her house. The curtains were closed, the garden unkempt. The silence there wasn't the same as mine. It was the silence of someone trying to hide their shame. For a moment I considered stopping, ringing the doorbell, telling her everything was okay. But I decided against it. Not all redemptions require witnesses. Some simply require distance. As I walked back, I noticed how much wider the street seemed than before. The trees seemed taller, the wind cooler, the sky wider. It was as if the world had stretched to remind me that there was still room to continue, to begin again, to exist beyond the pain. And for the first time I felt gratitude for what I had experienced. Because without what had broken me, I would never have learned the value of remaining whole. With each passing day, the memories became less sharp. They no longer cut, only outlined. And it was then that I understood something simple yet profound. Revenge, deep down, isn't about the other. It's about giving yourself back the right to exist without fear. True justice doesn't happen on the stage, but in the silence of your conscience, when you can look back and not feel anger. Even so, there was something that wouldn't leave me completely at peace. A subtle foreboding, like a noise in the back of my mind. Maybe it was just the echo of history, or maybe it was life preparing its next test. Because the truth is, the end is never definitive. It always leaves a door ajar, a loose thread that fate can pull when least expected. That night, before falling asleep, I looked out the window and saw the moon's reflection in the glass. The silvery light cut through the darkness, dividing the room in two, shadow and light, memory and future. And in that silent contrast, I understood that nothing truly ends. The story only changes voice. The wind blew the curtains, and for a moment everything stood still. Time, breathing, the very sound of the world. It was the same feeling I had in the hall before the first sonic boom of the microphone. A subtle warning that something new was approaching, even if I didn't yet know what it was. And deep down, a part of me waited. Because there are silences that don't announce the end, but the beginning of a revelation yet to come. Time passed, and what was once pain became memory. Not an open wound, but a scar that tells a story. There's something sacred in the act of surviving, even when the world tries to bury you in silence. I learned this slowly, unhurriedly, between calm days and long nights. Each morning took on a new meaning, as if the light streaming through the window were a reminder that I was still here, whole, even after everything. It wasn't a miracle, nor a spectacular victory. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible restart, made of small choices. Choosing not to respond, choosing not to return, choosing to take care of what was left. That's how I discovered that power lies not in striking back, but in standing tall when they expected you to fall. And somehow, this realization gave me more strength than any outburst could. Over time, I learned to look back without anger, to understand that some people are just chapters, not endings. That love, when true, never needs to be explained. And that silence, when born of peace, is louder than any scream. I began to see myself differently, not as the woman who was betrayed, but as the one who had the courage to look in the mirror and say, "It's over, but I stayed." There are days when I still find myself remembering the ballroom, the lights, the piercing sound of the microphone. It's curious how moments of rupture become milestones of rebirth. That moment, which seemed like the end, was only the beginning of a new version of me. A less naive, more whole woman. Someone who understands that dignity isn't a luxury. It's survival. Today, I look at life with a calm I never knew before. Not the calm that comes from the absence of pain, but the calm that arises after a storm, when the ground is still damp and the air carries the scent of renewal. It's in that moment that we understand. What seemed like destruction was just the ground being prepared for something new to grow. I started laughing again, making plans, falling in love with little things. A well-brewed coffee, a light conversation, the sound of rain hitting the roof without bringing back bitter memories. I learned that happiness doesn't come as a spectacle, but as a constant, discreet whisper, one that only those who have learned to listen can hear. And if there's one thing that night taught me, it was that no one emerges from a fall intact, but some learn to dance on the shards. Strength isn't in not breaking, but in knowing what to do with the pieces. And when I realized that, everything made sense. The microphone, the rain, the silence. It was all part of the same story. My rebirth before an audience that thought I'd never smile again. Perhaps that's why telling this story isn't just about reliving, it's about sharing. Because there's something liberating in knowing that pain can be transformed into words, and words into healing. Every time someone listens, identifies, sees themselves in this reflection, the wound heals a little more. And if you've made it this far, it's because you too carry a memory that begs to be transformed. Perhaps that's why so many people choose to stay close, following each revelation, like someone who finds a mirror and, for the first time, recognizes themselves in it. So, if this story touched you in any way, if it made you remember, understand, or simply take a deep breath, leave your message. Sometimes a simple gesture of support, a comment, a discreet touch of presence, is what keeps the chain that transforms pain into strength alive. Because no one wins alone. Healing, when shared, multiplies. Today, I'm no longer the person who held that microphone. I'm someone who's learned to listen to the sound of their own voice without fear. Who understands that love doesn't have to be war to be true. And that dignity, once restored, is the most silent and powerful form of revenge. And that's why when I look back, I don't see a fall. I see an awakening. A moment when everything fell apart only for me to learn how to rebuild. And if there's one thing I wish for anyone listening to me, it's this. That one day you too will rise from your own abyss and realize, with the same amazement I realized, that a happy ending never depends on someone else. It always begins the moment you choose yourself.